want to tell you a story of when I was in a sociology class years and years ago, 1999, pre-September 11th. And as sociology classes do, they broke us into small groups. So I found myself in a small group with a couple different students. The one student that I remember is the student that I engaged. And she was about 23, maybe 21, around there somewhere, 22 plus or minus a year or so. And she was a sociology major, so we were in her domain. I myself at the time was a history major, and that translates to, I'm the kind of guy where I love to listen to lectures, I love to read source notes, and then leave me alone and I'll go write a paper and then submit it. Small groups were not my thing. Small group discussions, not my thing. So Miss Sociology major is gonna lead the small group. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'm here to get an A, I'm paying my own way through college, I come to my classes, I do what I'm told, let's just get through this. But the sociology major decides to start the discussion off, and she starts the discussion off with this quote, all cultures are equal, end quote. Now I heard that, and I said to her, you can't possibly mean that. And she said, oh, yes I do, all cultures are equal. Now, a couple of things crossed my mind immediately. One was the practice of sati. And I thought, well, maybe that's too obscure and I'm not going to go into that. And maybe we will later on down the line. But for the flow of the story, I said to her, I went through my list of things about cultures. I thought, well, the most current event thing at the time that was making the news was, and they called it back then, female circumcision. So I said to her, you can't possibly mean that. I mean, how do you feel about female circumcision? And her honest response was, I don't know what that is. I went, oh, well, okay, let me explain it to you. Some cultures will take young girls, prepubescent girls, hold them down, and without any anesthetics, no painkillers, not even an aspirin, they'll take something with an edge, be it a scalpel if the young lady is lucky, or a torn up Coke can, using that kind of a sharp edge of the aluminum there, or a broken piece of glass, and they will hack away and remove the young girl's clitoris. And she looked at me, square in the eyes, and matter-of-factly informed me that, quote, you're lying, end quote. And I said, no, I'm not. And luckily for me, the professorette was walking by, and the professorette said, oh, no, he's not lying at all. And this is actually a huge problem. And I sit on a committee, and we're trying to find ways to pass an international law to ban this practice. It's horrible. And then the professorette went on to another small groups discussion to oversee what they were saying. So I turned back to the 22, 23-year-old sociology major, and I said, so do you still hold with this belief that all cultures are equal? You've just had your own professorette verify what I've told you. There are hideous things that happen in the name of culture. And she looked at me and she simply said nothing. She didn't say, you're right, some cultures are not as good as other cultures. She didn't say all cultures are equal, because she was still processing the horror of what is female circumcision or female genital mutilation. She just sat there, didn't say anything. Now that was 1999. It's the year 2018. And believe it or not, well, most likely you will believe it, there are people who still hold to the myth that all cultures are equal. And it's mind-blowing to me. It's mind-blowing to me. Let's talk about the practice of sati. The practice of sati in India was if you had a widow who survived her husband's death, well, they build a funeral pyre to cremate her husband. They light the fire. And if the woman, culturally speaking, is properly overcome with grief, she throws herself onto the funeral pyre. If she's not properly overcome with grief and doesn't throw herself on the funeral pyre, her in-laws will pick her up and throw her on the funeral pyre. Now that practice came to an end circa 1829 because a certain English lord who was over India at the time decided to pass a law against it. He saw what was going on. He understood the culture that he was surrounded by, and his culture said, this is wrong, this is evil, and he put his foot down and he sent the word out. You have your culture, you're gonna incinerate living women. Well, I have my culture. We're gonna build gallows next to the funeral pyres, and anybody that throws a woman onto a funeral pyre and burns her alive, my men will hang them. See, Lord William Bentinck wasn't a multiculturalist in our sense of the term. Oh, he was a multiculturalist. He understood other cultures, but he understood that some cultures were better than others. Lord William Bentinck also put an end to a 450-year-old cult called the Thuggees. They would ritually murder people to satisfy their Hindu god. When that came to his attention, he said, well, that's got to come to an end. Here's another thing that Lord William Bentinck also put an end to. Female infanticide. You see, back in the days that he was around, the custom in India was a woman gives birth, and if it turns out to be a female baby, well, they would kill it because they wanted to have a son. I would argue that that cultural practice was wicked and evil, and I think that Lord William Bentinck going into India and saying, no, that's not how we're going to do things, was a good thing. Here's something for people to ponder. In the year 2018 in India, well, they no longer commit female infanticide. No, they don't do that. That would be against the law. But what they do is they take advantage of modern day technology. Some things like ultrasounds, for example. A pregnant woman will have an ultrasound done. And the technician will say, hey, look at that, 10 toes, 10 fingers. You have a perfectly healthy baby, I'm sorry, let's be honest here, fetus. You have a female fetus inside you. To which the mother at that point will say, I would like to have an abortion, please. Gender selective abortions. If the, quote, fetus, end quote, is a female, well, then let's abort it. And if the fetus is a boy, then let's proceed and give birth to that child. One would think the feminists of America would be outraged with that. And that would be one of their major top talking points about the plight of women in the world. However, you never hear of that. It's never brought up because of possibly politically making abortion sound a little more hideous than what they want for their narrative. Other cultural things that are going on today right now that those who utter the phrase all cultures are equal are either oblivious to or ambivalent of. How about slavery?